Good morning and welcome to Women Lead TV, brought to you by Connected Women of Influence. I'm Kimberlee Centera, your host of Workplace Transformation Begins With Us. And today we are having a conversation about negotiating tough conversations. And I am so delighted to welcome internationally acclaimed speaker, author, and founder of the global self leadership platform, She Gets It, AmyK Hutchens. Welcome, AmyK. We're so delighted to have you here today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Kimberlee. Thanks. It's a true privilege.
Well, I love this idea of negotiating and looking at tough conversations. And when I was doing a little bit of research, I was looking at the numbers that corporations lose in terms of lost profitability from the failure of people to have tough conversations. And even just thinking about my own business, the importance of giving people the language, the words. And I think nobody really prepares us to have those tough conversations. And the first time that I heard you speak, I was so impressed with the idea, because one of the first things that you did was starting with positivity and reframing. So tell us about these negative conversations and negotiating, and how do we want to have these tough conversations?
Well, you bring up so much. So let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, you talk about the profitability or the loss thereof when we avoid or delay a tough conversation. So research has shared with us that the average person waits or delays or puts off a tough conversation anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, which is staggering to think about that. So not only is there a financial component, there's all the emotional stress while it's taken up headspace while you're delaying or procrastinating. And then the cost is right around $12,000 on average. So if you think about every tough conversation that you're delaying or you're waiting to have, there is a real financial aspect to that. And you and I chatted just a couple of weeks ago when we had the privilege of meeting one another. And we talked about the idea that so many people are like, oh, this is going to be a really hard conversation, or this is going to be really difficult. And I think that just resetting and reframing the intention to, hey, this is an important conversation. It matters to us. It matters to our relationship. It matters to our partnership. It matters to our workplace culture. It matters to our people. Really resets that we're there for a common goal.
Right. And so reframing is an important part. And I love the idea, because one of my big takeaways was preparing for that conversation, right? And what are some of the things that we want to do besides reframing and our approach and how we think about the conversation? First off, what are some of the other important ways that we want to prepare, because we want to set it up for success, right? We want it to be helpful conversation.
Absolutely, Kimberlee. And so I joke, for all the real estate people that are listening, they all know the mantra, location, location, location. When it comes to tough conversations, it's like prep, prep, prep. And so one of the things that I think that's really important to do is first set your intention. What is it that you're looking for in this specific conversation? What are you hoping to get out of it? Common ground, just civility? Do you want to change a mindset? Do you want to be able to educate somebody? Do you want to get an offer or a request on the table? Do you want to move forward with a different behavioral set? So just get clear on this conversation, not where you're going in 3 years, but this specific conversation. And then I'm a queen of magical phrases. I love my magical phrases, because people know exactly how we want them to feel by the words that we use and how we show up. And so I'm a big believer, Kimberlee, that our words will either help or they'll hurt. And so if we can prepare, what are our magical phrases? It could be how might we, Kimberlee, increase our sales by 12% between now and the end of the year? How might we heal or turn around our relationship? How might we make you a more integrated, successful team player? But really having that overarching framework, and then thinking about some of the questions that you want to ask this individual so that you can give their voice the credence that it deserves. It's not just you talking and downloading. So you're asking questions And then you're going to end a tough conversation with either a request for their changed behavior or something that you want them to do, or maybe you're going to offer to do something, or both. But I also love, and you're going to laugh when I say this, but this is the actress in me. This is like the former, theater major in college. I do believe in role play. I think that role play is really important so that I can practice. Oh, maybe Kimberlee will say this. Oh, maybe Kimberlee will do this. Maybe Kimberlee will do that. Maybe she'll say something else, so that I feel more steady when I'm in the conversation. It allows me to actually elevate my confidence to role play a little bit.
And so I'm hearing kind of maybe collaboration, right? Approaching the conversation more collaboratively. I'm also hearing maybe curiosity. We want to incorporate some curiosity, right? We want to have some questions. And then how about those tough responses, right? We want to ask questions. How do we handle that? People can say things, and some people are very direct. And so how do we want to respond to that if we're trying to be collaborative, we're trying to be curious, and then maybe we get kind of a different response? What's the best way to coordinate in that case?
There are several different ways that we can respond that are contextual. So the first one that works in any scenario is the power of pause. And that is nothing new. We've all heard this. There's huge power in the pause, but that gives you a chance to take that deep breath and really think about how you want to thoughtfully respond instead of react. So sometimes it can be, and this is a magical phrase that I share a lot with my clients, is I'll say, oh, I wasn't expecting you to say that. And then just take a pause. And then you could say, I'm not sure how to respond about that. Let me pull my thoughts together because I want to respond thoughtfully. I'm really listening to you. So that's one way to respond. The other way that you can also respond is if it's something a little bit egregious or blindsiding or even, slightly inappropriate, then for you to just say, oh, how are you hoping I respond to that remark? And so that kind of puts the critical thinking back on them, which is a beautiful way to do it. And also the other thing, which is, again, contextually specific, sometimes we feel like we have to respond in the moment in a tough conversation, and we don't. Sometimes people can give us a piece of information that we weren't expecting. And so you might end up saying something like, Kimberlee, that's a really new piece of information, and I need to really think that through. I want to put pause on this conversation. I want to go reflect on this, and I'd like to pick up this conversation tomorrow. And that allows you to get some distance on your own thinking and maybe your own emotions. So that's always an option too. We think that we have to respond immediately, but we don't. So we take that pause, and then we could say something like, wow, I wasn't expecting you to say that. I need to think that through. Or how are you hoping I respond to that? Or you can come back with a little bit more innocuous, but you're going to put it back on them, and you can say, oh, well, help me understand. Say more about that. And again, you're just letting them unpack a comment while you can start to wrap your head around it.
I love that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I love the idea of, it's almost kind of like taking back your power in a sense in these conversations. It also feels to me like as women, we need to practice that. I know even myself, there's such a tendency to feel like you have to respond to everything. And people are oftentimes uncomfortable with that silence. So these are almost skills that you need to practice, right? I mean, maybe
absolutely
practicing, you don't necessarily have to save pausing or just stopping for a moment. That doesn't always have to be part of a hard conversation. That can just be, I think it can actually give you more credibility and have you appear as thoughtful. And people know that you're trying to hear them. You want to hear them. You want to understand where they're coming from. I want to make sure that people know how to reach you, AmyK. So tell us, and it'll be posted elsewhere, but how can people reach you if they want to reach out to you?
It's super easy. So one of our core philosophies is generosity, and we have a ton of free tools at shegetsit.com. So if you go to www.shegetsit.com, we've got tools for navigating tough conversations with the bestie, to holding your voice at work, to having a whole tool on tough conversations because we can't possibly cover it all here today. but we have lots of free tools and you are welcome to go grab them there. You can follow me on Instagram at AmyK Hutchens, same thing on LinkedIn. Thanks for that, Kimberlee. That's very kind of you.
Great, great. Now help me with emotional. You're having a conversation and people get emotional and maybe even tearful, right? These are important conversations and so how do we want to respond to that, right? I don't think we want to cut people off because sometimes these conversations they do involve topics and discussions that are important to us. So how do we respond in those cases where maybe things get very emotional?
Well, the first thing is that we need to respond compassionately. So by really listening to somebody, we want to make sure that they are feeling like they are seen, heard, understood, respected, and supported. And one of the things that I think that's important for all of us to recognize is that the mind-body connection is not woo-woo. It's very real. I'm a science gal. We know from fMRIs, functional magnetic resonance imaging, that what's going on in the brain sends a message physiologically throughout the body. So you wouldn't be the first or the last person to get a little teary-eyed or to have your blood vessels constrict in your throat or your chest will get tight. And I think that one of the most beautiful things that you can say to somebody if their throat is tightening up or they're starting to tear up is to just say, hold, clearly this matters to you. It's okay. I'll wait. You can take a deep breath. This is fine. I'm here. We're going to talk this through. And that is a beautiful gift to just say to somebody, hold, clearly this matters to you. And on the flip side, if it's happening to you, then one of the things to realize too is that you don't need to apologize. I know that a lot of us do that. We're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But the truth is your body's just telling you how much you care. And so if you can communicate that, oh, clearly this matters to me, just hold for a sec, let my body catch up, then that allows for a moment of grace between two human beings.
What about the idea of, can you incorporate a pause and maybe use similar words like you even said if someone says something that's kind of hard, can you take a pause and say, I need some time to reflect on that, give me a few minutes, whatever it might be. Is it acceptable then to maybe kind of get up and leave the conversation? What's the best way to handle that if you feel like I really need some time to compose myself? This is really important.
I think that the first thing is really listening to your body and finding out what's going on. And it's okay to be surprised. So if you suppose somebody says something to you and you find yourself unexpectedly like upset or you start to cry. In fact, this happened to a woman that I was chatting with the other day as she started to cry and she's like, I don't even know where the tears are coming from. And I said, well, that's okay. There's something got triggered, something got activated. And so just take a moment. And if you need to take a longer moment, we can do that. But here's a great, again, it's a magical phrase. If it's happening to you or if it's happening to somebody else, I love the magical phrase, something just got activated. I find it to be less volatile than to use the word trigger. But I could say, oh, Kimberlee, something just got activated. Take a beat, take a breath. Or I could say it about myself. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Clearly something got activated. I need a moment. I need a minute. And then you can either get up, go get a drink of water, change your environment, find out like what's really going on, or take a deep breath and then come back. Or you can just say, in the moment, I need a few seconds. I just need to take a quick minute. But I think that one of the things that's most important is to give yourself grace in these moments instead of feeling like, oh, now I have to apologize. Now I'm embarrassed. It's like, no, I'm just having a human reaction.
Right. And I love because we do a lot of times we feel self-conscious about that or we feel like people are going to perceive that as weak or, we're too vulnerable. But it happens, right?
It does happen.
I'm also wondering too about feedback, right? Mm-hmm. This idea of feedback and having these conversations, right? Because I think whether it's in our homes with our families or our significant others or in our workplace, a lot of times we're in the position of giving and receiving feedback. What are some tips around that? What are some ways to both share feedback and I think receive feedback in the way that you can make it positive and do some self-examination and awareness?
Well, it's a practice, and that's what you said. So I'm going to start there. Changing the way that we word what we want is so important. And we've all been wired for the negative. So we'll say something like, don't do this, stop doing that, I need. And one of the most beautiful things is to start thinking about forward focused language. So if I said to you, like, let's say you and I are girlfriends and I want to spend more time with you. If I come to you and I'm like, Kimberlee, we're not spending enough time together, that's very negative. It's backward focused and it sounds critical and punitive, like, Kimberlee, you've been blowing me off. A much more forward focused conversation is to be in the practice of saying things like, oh, Kimberlee, I love it when we hang out. Can we hang out the next month? You know, it's been a while. I'd love to see you in the next couple of weeks. I'd love to prioritize some time together so we can connect, maybe pour a glass of wine. I'm now painting a picture of what it is I want that's far more likely to get you to change your behavior and do what I want than if I'm like, Kimberlee, you never call me anymore.
Right, which makes me feel defensive, right?
Yes, it
Well,
does.
I'm busy, what do you expect?
And in that energy of I'm being critical, it's going to make you even less likely to want to hang out with me. So it's really important. We teach it in our sales programs a lot. It's activation energy, really coming from a place of I'm going to activate you to move forward positively instead of moving forward with like that kind of either negativity, criticism, or the opposite, backward focused conversation.
Right. And I love that, right? Again, and because I think it opens up, more of an opportunity for an exchange and for a connection. And I think that's one of the things that I heard even when you talked about reframing is it creates that opportunity for connection. Is it possible through these difficult and tough conversations? Can we actually build a closer connection? Can we come out of these conversations and actually kind of renew our relationships? Is that possible?
Very much so. In fact, one of my favorite expressions that I say all the time, my clients love it too, is communicating to connect is one of the most important things that we can do as leaders. So whether it's self-leadership, so all those tough conversations with ourselves at 3:00 in the morning, or whether it's a conversation at home or at work with another, I love the concept of soft heart, firm spine. So in these, when we're navigating tough conversations, we can still show up with a soft heart, meaning we're going to listen to somebody. We're going to actively listen so that we can understand or that we can educate, but we can still have boundaries. We can still have a firm spine. We don't have to be a doormat. We can have expectations. We can state our expectations clearly and transparently. But if I lead with a soft heart and then follow it with a firm spine, I can actually have a much more positive, connected relationship going forward than when we started.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that idea. That's really, feels correct, in terms of going in and being clear, right, on what it is that you want, but also being compassionate and engaging and being willing to create the relationship. You do so much in the corporate sector. What are some of the things that you see around these kinds of conversations? Are there things that come up a lot when you're talking to people, when you're interacting with people? Are there some common themes?
There's a lot of common themes. And one of them is, trying to turn performance around. And so it's that classic, if Kimberlee, you're my boss and you're like, oh, AmyK, we need to talk, your performance, you're going in the wrong direction. That's not a motivating conversation. That's not a behavioral changing conversation. But if you were to call me in and you were to say something along the lines of, AmyK, let's talk about how might we make you an even more integrated, successful team player, you're affirming me. You're telling me that I have value and that you're trying to paint a vision for how I can improve my performance that I can get excited and motivated about. And that's a very different conversation, how I can be an even more integrated, successful team player than my performance is in the gutter. Now, again, if you need to fire somebody, that's a different conversation. But if you're saying, I want to invest with you and take the time to make you a bigger, better, bolder player and contributor in our company, then let's think again about that framework that excites and motivates me.
Well, this is, been amazing, and there's so much more we could talk about, right? And so thank you for sharing all that with us. again, we could probably talk all day and all that. So thank you. It's fabulous. And that's our show today. So that's a wrap. And a big thank you to AmyK for being here and so generously sharing your thoughts and ideas. We so appreciate. And thank you to all of our viewers for listening in. We really appreciate it. It's been my pleasure to host today's episode. And I hope you enjoyed it and learned something as much as I did. And to have a fantastic week ahead. And until next time, keep learning, growing, and exploring.